Not really. I mean, it's like some people want to climb Everest, you know? We didn't.
Do you know that some of the most legendary and popular songs ever made were once considered too scandalous, too provocative, or too radical to be played on the radio? From holiday tunes to rock classics, from soulful gems to psychedelic wonders, these songs have a history of controversy and censorship that will surprise you. In this video, we're going to expose the top 10 classic songs that were actually banned from American radio. So get ready to learn the hidden secrets from these banned classics. Let's begin. 10. I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, Jimmy Boyd, 1952. Who would start banning the 13-year-old record hit of a cute freckle-faced boy? Who is that? It's none other than the Catholic Archdiocese of Boston. The song I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, which was recorded by teenage Jimmy Boyd in 1952, was meant to tell the story of a youngster who wakes up and finds his father, dressed as Santa Claus, kissing his mother. However, the church officials mistook the song's irony for an adulterous relationship between Santa Claus and the mother. They denounced the song for blending Christmas with sex, and as a result, it was taken off numerous radio stations' playlists. Jimmy Boyd, when 13 years old, recorded the original version of I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus in 1952. The song was really popular. It reached the top, earned a gold record after selling 1 million copies, another gold record after selling 1 million more, and because Jimmy Boyd loved horses, a special silver saddle was given for the 3rd million copies sold. For a song that was essentially just an advertising jingle, that's a lot of success. Saks Fifth Avenue, the department store, was the one who came up with the idea instead of any record label. Saks commissioned the song to be used on their yearly Christmas card, which served as a marketing tool for the store. The card included a drawing of a mother kissing Santa while he holds her perplexed toddler by artist Perry Barlow, which had previously appeared on the New Yorker's cover. The song was fiercely condemned by Catholics who claimed it was blasphemous and implied a link between sex and Christmas. They only demanded that the local boycott halt when Jimmy Boyd, poor Jimmy, had a meeting with the church officials to give an explanation. Talk about being a Grinch! Who would have thought that a small Christmas song that Saks Fifth Avenue had commissioned to promote their Christmas cards could cause such a stir? The song, which peaked at number 1 on the Billboard Pop Singles chart in December 1952, was criticized by the Boston Roman Catholic Church for mixing Christmas and kissing. The brief ban was eventually lifted when Jimmy Boyd, the 13-year-old singer of the song, met with the Archdiocese to provide an explanation of the song. Many people overlooked that particular aspect. In one particularly memorable moment from Fresh Prince, Will is horrified by the song until Carlton clarifies it to him. In one rendition of the song's adult father sings a few words to the audience explaining the situation. The father is now singing about his daughter, thus even though the words remain the same, the verse makes perfect sense now. She didn't see me creep down the stairs to have a peep. She thought I was tucked up in my bedroom fast asleep. The ban, though, was short-lived, since Jimmy Boyd traveled to Boston to meet with church leaders and clarify the song's purpose. He reassured them that Santa Claus was actually the child's father in disguise and that the song was innocent and lighthearted. He even took a picture with the Archbishop, which contributed to the song's resurgence in popularity and the lifting of the ban. 9. Wake Up Little Susie, Everly Brothers, 1957. It's quite harmless stuff. The song is about a young couple who go on a date and unintentionally fall asleep, only to wake up at 4 in the morning. It is told from the perspective of the youngster and his girlfriend, Susie. Once more, the Boston Roman Catholic Church was outraged, arguing the song was too ambiguous about the details of the couple's relationship before they fell asleep. Though the ban astonished the Everly Brothers, who are well known for their clean-sounding rock and roll, it ultimately had little impact on the song's popularity. The 1957 #1 hit song Wake Up Little Susie by the Everly Brothers was prohibited in Boston because it left parents wondering what their kids were doing while they thought they were asleep. This is another example of the puritanical mentality of the 1950s, which frequently stunted the artistic originality of the musicians of that time. Felice and Baudelaire Bryant, a husband and wife duo who penned the majority of the Everly Brothers tunes in the 1950s, composed this song. Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley, and Bob Dylan had also recorded their songs. But as we'll demonstrate, times do indeed change. George W. Bush, a born-again Christian and presidential contender at the time, said that Wake Up Little Susie just so happened to be his favorite song nearly 50 years later. What an irony! He even performed a few verses of the song with running partner Dick Cheney at a 2000 campaign rally. Once deemed scandalous and divisive, the song rose to fame and became a beloved classic by many generations. It also served as the basis for the 1987 film of the same name, which starred John Cusack and Elizabeth Shue. The song is still a tribute to the Everly Brothers' talent and appeal, as their harmonies and sense of style impacted a lot of other rock and roll musicians. Rock and roll has always included harmony singing, but without the 3- and 4-part harmonies of doo-wop, which came from blues and black gospel traditions, we would never have had Simon and Garfunkel, the Beatles, or the Byrds. The Everly Brothers, with their ringing, close harmony technique, introduced a whole new sound, the sound of Appalachia, put to hard-driving acoustic guitars and a subtle backbeat rhythm to the rock and roll lexicon, which was necessary to attract those groups. 8. The Kingsmen's Louie Louie, 1963. Richard Berry's 1955 song Louie Louie is arguably the most well-known band song in American history. Nevertheless, Ultimate Classic Rock, a nationally syndicated rock radio show, found certain obscure and seemingly incomprehensible lyrics in the Kingsmen's 1963 remake of the song explicit. Many stations banned him as a result of this. The opening line of the first stanza of one of the most well-known records of the last century is, "A fine little girl, she waits for me." The rest is rock and roll history, although the record begins with the chorus, "Louie Louie, me gotta go," rather than the verse. The comma is absent from the song's title, Louie Louie. This could indicate that Louie Louie is the name of the person the performer is addressing. You would be mistaken to believe that Louie Louie is the singer's mate on board the ship because the line, "I sail the ship all alone," makes it obvious the singer is single. According to other reports, the musician is speaking to a bartender on whatever island he happens to be on. Originally released in 1957 as the flip side to "You Are My Sunshine," we do know the singer wishes to return home from the Caribbean Sea and tells his girl, "I'll never leave again." However, it did not reach any national pop or R&B charts. Still, it became a favorite among young bands, particularly those from the Pacific Northwest. After hearing offensive lyrics in a recent rock and roll song on the radio, 2 adolescents from small-town Indiana took action. They sent the governor a letter. After reading the letter, the governor took action. To get the album, he dispatched an assistant to a record shop. He took a seat and began listening to it a few times over. He notified the Federal Communications Commission after becoming certain that the record might be tainted. He got in touch with the Indiana Broadcasters Association and asked them to take the song off of the rotation on their member radio stations. The US government and the FCC would be looking into the recording in a matter of days. An FBI inquiry was started to determine the specific content of the song lyrics when someone complained to Robert F. Kennedy, the acting Attorney General. The FBI declared at the end of the investigation that it was not possible to determine whether this recording is obscene. The Kingsmen's 1963 version of the 1955 Richard Berry smash song Rhythm and Blues attracted the attention of the censorship boards. To be honest, this song's lyrics are a little jumbled, just like the logic behind its prohibition. The poor quality track's unclear lyrics immediately led one to believe that it was done on purpose to mask profanity. The FBI was requested to step in and assess if the transit of pornographic material had broken any laws. The song's official lyrics were never released, and the FBI closed the case on Louie Louie following a 2-year investigation that produced few results. 7. Strange Fruit, Billie Holiday, 1956. We honor jazz artist Billie Holiday, whose song Strange Fruit brought attention to the horrors of lynching in America during a period of increased anti-dissent repression. Holiday's performance was notable because it was one of the first well-known musical demonstrations against racism, which aided in gaining public support for the civil rights struggle. The moving song cemented Holiday's reputation and continues to be a major artistic influence to this day. Despite becoming Billie Holiday's best-selling single of her career, Strange Fruit, a 1939 song, was not allowed to be recorded by Columbia Records during the 1930s. Even after the song was eventually recorded and released for her by a new label, many radio stations continued to refuse to play it. The song, Strange Fruit, was based on an anti-lynching poem about African American men in the South at the time, which is why some radio station administrators were upset about it. Nevertheless, in 1978, it was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Following Columbia Records' refusal to record Strange Fruit, Holiday recorded the song at Commodore Records, a tiny independent studio. After becoming popular and garnering national exposure, the song inspired supporters to push for anti-lynching legislation by mentioning it to congressmen. After several club organizers told her not to, Holiday added a clause to her contract that gave her the right to sing the song. Holiday was identified with the song for the rest of her life since it became enmeshed with her identity. She encountered racism despite her quick rise to fame and fortune, and she started using Strange Fruit as a weapon and a shield. The song Strange Fruit was based on a 1937 poem by Jewish schoolteacher Abel Meeropol, who was appalled by the horrific images of lynching he saw in the newspapers. He published the poem under the pseudonym Lewis Allen in 1937 and later set it to music with his wife. It was a protest against racism in America, especially the lynchings of African Americans in the South. The song caught the attention of Barney Josephson, the owner of Cafe Society, a progressive nightclub in New York that welcomed both black and white patrons. He introduced the song to Holiday, who agreed to perform it at the club. When Billie Holiday originally approached her recording label Columbia about recording the song, they first turned her down. However, stories about how she was first exposed to it differ. Her producer, John Hammond, declined to collaborate with her on the project out of concern that it would be too contentious and draw backlash from the South. Holiday went to Commodore producer Milt Gabler instead. Holiday asked for and got a one-day release from her studio deal so she could work with Gabler on the recording of Strange Fruit. It was unexpectedly outlawed right away in the Deep South. Many radio stations removed the song off their playlists even after it was released because they thought it was too provocative and unsettling. A few listeners also voiced disapproval or made boycott threats against the song. Holiday's most successful album to date, the song grew popular and sold over 1 million copies despite the banning and animosity. It also turned into a potent anthem for the civil rights movement, inspiring numerous other musicians to write songs on racial injustice or cover it. But that didn't stop it from being a huge hit for Holiday. Due to the song's creative and historical significance, it was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1978. In addition, Time magazine named it the Song of the Century in 1999, and the Library of Congress chose it for preservation in the National Recording Registry in 2002. The song is still a powerful and enduring reminder of the atrocities of lynching and the bravery of those who dared to oppose it. Holiday was finally slain by Strange Fruit when Harry J. Anslinger, the commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics under the Treasury Department, conducted a witch hunt against her while she battled a heroin addiction. Anslinger was a virulent racist individual who maintained that drugs caused black people to forget their place. He notably attacked jazz musicians, accusing them of being hazardous and creating devilish music while high on marijuana. Holiday, who was in her 40s at the time, struggled with heroin addiction. Some have claimed that the song's gloomy tone complemented her disposition. She had grown, oddly, sadly suited to capture the full grotesqueness of the song, writes David Margolick, author of Strange Fruit, the biography of a song. She no longer just sang of deformed mouths and protruding eyes, she was their embodiment. 6. My Generation, The Who, 1965. The lyrics, "Hope I die before I get old," were featured in My Generation, but it was okay because the vocals resembled stuttering. The BBC forbade the song from being played on air because they didn't want to offend those who actually struggle with stuttering. They eventually gave in after the song became a big hit. The line, "Why don't you all fade away," from the Who song My Generation was taken out of rotation because the programming directors thought it might offend people who stutter. This occurred several years prior to anything offending anybody at all. Therefore, this line of reasoning was never really taken seriously, and the majority of people assumed that the real reason for the prohibition was that it suggested using a much more vulgar F word. Evidently, they were nervous with the mere implication of an obscenity. But the song became extremely popular, and the BBC eventually changed their mind. The band's disobedient stage persona would translate into Townsend's compositions. The Who demonstrated their attitude in songs like My Generation and subsequently Won't Get Fooled Again. This image would go on to inspire a number of generations of rebellious rock stars in the years that follow. I Can't Explain, the band's debut single, was released on January 15, 1965, and it reached number 8 on the charts. However, The Who didn't really start to change the course of rock history until the publication of their second single, My Generation. The meaning of My Generation is unquestionably rooted in the disconnection that the post-war British youth felt from their parents' and grandparents' generations in the 1960s, despite the fact that the song's backstory has given rise to several fabrications over time. Townsend recently discussed this in the year 2019. The idea behind My Generation stemmed from my belief that, as artists, we need to establish a distinction between those who had participated in World War II and those who were born immediately after the conflict. Despite having made such great sacrifices for us, those folks were unable to offer us any support, inspiration, or advice at all. We used to refer to ourselves as being disenfranchised. We were told to shut up and enjoy the peace. But we refused to follow through on those orders. We were also forbidden from joining the army and from speaking. The song My Generation expresses how much the adult generation despises youth culture. 5. Eve of Destruction, Barry Maguire, 1965. Sung by Barry Maguire and written by P.F., Eve of Destruction is one of the most innocent-seeming songs on this list. Several American radio stations banned it after the ruling class decided they didn't like Maguire's views and believed his band was anti-war. The song became a #1 Billboard hit in 1965 despite several offensive phrases, such as, "Human respect is disintegrating," "This whole crazy world is just too frustrating," and "You're old enough to kill but not for voting." The civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, the draft, the prospect of nuclear war, unrest in the Middle East, and the American space program are just a few of the societal topics mentioned in the song. The song gained popularity thanks to the American media, which used it as a symbol of all the problems with the generation that was coming of age at the time. Some American radio stations banned the song because of its contentious lyrics, alleging it was an aid to the enemy in Vietnam. Conservatives also voiced their criticism of the song. Additionally, a few radio stations banned it. The Byrds were offered the song as a possible single a la Dylan, but they turned it down. Another LA band is the Turtles that frequently recorded the Byrds' abandoned or unapproved songs. Shortly before Maguire's version was removed, their rendition was released as a track on their 1965 debut album, It Ain't Me, Babe. It was then made available as a single and peaked at number 100 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1970. 1964 saw the composition of Eve of Destruction by P.F., a 19-year-old songwriter named Sloan. Sloan, a native of New York, started penning songs at the age of 13. At the age of 16, he secured a position on Screen Gems' songwriting team. Screen Gems was California's biggest music publisher at the time. He got to know Steve Barry there, and they started writing songs together. Sloan composed songs for several of the prominent bands of the day, such as the Turtles, Herman's Hermits, Jan and Dean, and the Mamas and the Papas. Though he wrote Eve of Destruction alone, Sloan frequently worked alongside his companion, Barry. When Sloan originally presented the Byrds' Eve of Destruction, they rejected the song with gusto. He then went up to the Turtles. The LA-based Turtles frequently seized the opportunity to record the tunes that the Byrds had rejected. They looked over Eve of Destruction and even recorded a portion of it, but they did not listen to the tape. In 1970, the trio eventually made a record 5 years after Barry McGuire's initial success. 4. Highway to Hell, AC/DC, 1979. After 9/11, the 2000s as a whole took an unexpected turn. The entire world seemed to tremble when the Twin Towers in New York City collapsed, with people watching in horrified bewilderment at what was happening. In the wake of the terrorist attack, radio stations took extra precautions by enforcing censorship, even though nobody wanted to unintentionally utter something incorrect. The song Highway to Hell is by the Australian rock group AC/DC. It is the first song on their Highway to Hell album from 1979, where it was first made available as a single. Angus Young, Malcolm Young, and Bon Scott wrote the song, with Angus Young taking credit for the guitar riff. The band AC/DC had already released multiple studio albums and was touring non-stop to promote them. Angus Young once described the band's schedule as a highway to hell, which is how the song got its moniker. The radio giant Clear Channel released a list of songs that they deemed too unpleasant to air soon after the disaster. In the immediate wake of the incident, some of these decisions may have been justifiably criticized as oversensitive, but others may have left people wondering a little bit. After the 9/11 attacks, AC/DC's Highway to Hell was banned because it was deemed too insensitive for radio plays, despite the song's sinister subject matter having been the subject of contentious charges since its debut. The list comprises 164 distinct songs, encompassing all of Rage Against the Machine's catalog, spanning many musical genres, performers, and generations. Numerous individuals who viewed the list observed that the selection of songs that were discouraged varied from the entirely appropriate to fairly irrational. It was often discouraged to listen to songs that dealt with death, airplanes, war, disasters, or violence. Most people agreed that, considering the political atmosphere at the time, a brief ban on some songs would be appropriate and situation sensitive. The list would also feature a few contentious music selections, such as ones that spoke of Middle Easterners, parties, harmony, and peace. These songs were more divisive selections that caused some division in viewpoints. 3. God Only Knows, Beach Boys, 1966. Radio stations in the 1960s were notoriously trigger-happy, often banning music for the smallest of reasons. Though the song was one of the most beloved in history, nobody was safe, and the Beach Boys were once censored by broadcasters across the country. The Beach Boys challenged the Beatles and established themselves as pioneers with the publication of Pet Sounds. Though the California group wasn't receiving the same amount of excitement, its artistic output was still reaching breathtaking heights. But despite their fame, radio still didn't spare them from its fury after becoming offended by their song God Only Knows. The Beach Boys' God Only Knows was also prohibited by several radio stations due to religious beliefs, despite the band's own admission that they intended for God to be a spiritual word rather than a profane one. Paul McCartney, who formerly stated that God Only Knows is one of the few songs that always brings him to tears, considers it a particular favorite. Even though it's only a love song, it's done quite well. It demonstrates Brian's brilliance. He went on, I actually did it with him, and I'm not proud to tell that I cried throughout the sound check. Standing there singing this song breaks my heart, and doing it with Brian was simply too much. Even though McCartney gave the song a positive evaluation, the title of God Only Knows led several American radio stations to label it as offensive. The song was met with little to no opposition in liberal areas, while it was mostly rejected by broadcasters in southern regions where the populace is more devout. Brian Wilson believed the song's title implied it would be permanently banned from the radio since he knew censorship was imminent. He was surprised that only a few people declined to play it. Radio stations might not have played God Only Knows if Wilson hadn't written such a brilliant song, but for the most part, they were forced to play it. In fact, according to Brian Wilson, a number of musicians who were there for the song's recording described it as one of the most magical, beautiful experiences they had ever had. In line with the song's actual content, he ultimately chose not to alter the lyrics to the serious, heartfelt ballad. 2. War Pigs, Black Sabbath, 1970. Black Sabbath's second album, Paranoid, opens with a song that sounds a lot like a segue from its occult-themed predecessor. However, a Second World War air raid siren alerts people to impending acts of human violence. Guitar trills intersperse Ozzy Osbourne's Rising Wail, which introduces the line, "Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses," an identical rhyme that somehow works, as a tight two-chord power riff breaks the squall and occasionally punctures a tight hi-hat cymbal rhythm. War Pigs had a challenging birth. According to guitarist Tony Iommi's autobiography, the music was worked up on the road at a grim place in Zurich and was originally intended to serve as the background for the song Walpurgis, which is about the Satanic Christmas. Geezer Butler, the band's bassist and primary lyricist, later referred to these occult cobblers as something he had been reading about in Dennis Wheatley novels. The story of the original song, which was made available as a basement cassette years later, culminated with the burning of a priest in front of sinners who consumed rats' innards, but those generals also opened it. Black Sabbath's War Pigs met a similar fate to AC/DC's Highway to Hell after the 9/11 attacks. Radio stations banned the song. It doesn't actually stay away from war-related topics as its name implies, and even if the title had been something else, its metal sensibilities would have had it deemed too somber for a world in grief. It's interesting to note that the song emphasizes opposition to war, denouncing its atrocities and senselessness. Its lyrics denounce war as a harmful force that hurts common people while benefiting the powerful. Nevertheless, at the time, it was forbidden to discuss war or attacks on other countries. However, Ozzy Osbourne especially had a less than impeccable reputation when it came to decency, and their acts and words were frequently closely associated with Satanism. But the song's legacy persisted in the years that followed, and it is still regarded as one of the band's most significant contributions to rock and metal music. Butler was in a different attitude as the album was being recorded. The story's central characters in War Pigs are the generals, who the bassist refers to as the real Satanists, and the belligerent politicians who utilize the underprivileged as pawns in their game. As the War Pigs prepare for Judgment Day, Satan, the mastermind of the slaughter, who escapes, is left in place. The intricate 8-minute format of War Pigs had a significant impact on the heavy rock genre. The song begins with Bill Ward's drum fills raining down like mortar bombs, but suddenly a swinging beat and a new groovier riff push the song into a metallic funk. The song returns to the more restrained style of the early verse for the story's finale, but not before Butler unleashes a thunderous counter solo over the initial guitar solo, which is laced with a resonating open E string. 1. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, The Beatles, 1967. There are numerous reasons why Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band turned into a classic album. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band became a memorable album for many reasons. It was the Beatles' first concept album on which they imagined a band and a story to go along with the songs. Regarding musical experimentation, production methods, and cultural affect, it was also a groundbreaking album. The record defied pop music traditions, extended the creative potential of the album format, and captured the spirit of the 1960s, all of which had a significant impact on the music industry and society at large. Once the Beatles had taken a tour break and had some time to spare, they wrote and recorded it. It was during this time that the band decided to fully commit to their craft and develop original notions. June 1967 saw the publication of the album, which was ideal for the counterculture of the period and coincided with the well-known Summer of Love. It centers on the idea of a performance by a made-up military band led by Sgt. Pepper from the Edwardian era. In addition to the music, the album's artwork has an iconic cover, elaborate inner packaging, and for the first time in music history, a booklet containing the lyrics of all the songs. Many radio stations banned songs by the Beatles due to alleged drug connotations following John Lennon's notorious statement that the band was more popular than Jesus. Among the songs that gave rise to rumors that the title was an abbreviation for the drug LSD was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Despite the fact that LSD was a well-liked hallucinogen at the time the song was released, John Lennon angrily disputed that the song was related to the substance. Lennon claimed that a sketch of his son Julian, drawn by a fellow pupil, served as the inspiration for the song. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is a song from the Beatles' 1967 album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, mostly written by John Lennon and attributed to Lennon-McCartney. This record went on to become the best-selling album of the 1960s and is still the best-selling studio album in a number of nations, including India and the United Kingdom. Artwork from the nursery school that Julian, Lennon's son, called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds served as the inspiration for the song. Soon after the song was released, rumors circulated that the first letter of every noun in the title was meant to spell LSD on purpose. Lennon refuted this, but the BBC took the song off the air. A song like Got to Get You Into My Life that's directly about pot, although everyone missed it at the time. Paul McCartney stated in a 2004 interview when asked if the song was about LSD, "Day Tripper," he replied, "That's one about acid. Lucy in the Sky, that's pretty obvious. There's others that make subtle hints about drugs, but you know, it's easy to overestimate the influence of drugs on the Beatles' music." Even with controversies, the album still received 4 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, and was highly praised by both reviewers and fans. As one of the greatest albums of all time, it has topped a number of charts and polls. What a fascinating list of songs! We hope you enjoyed this video where we reveal the top 10 classic songs that were actually banned from American radio. These songs are not only great to listen to, but also have some incredible stories behind them. Which one of these songs is your favorite? Do you know any other songs that were banned from the radio? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Top 10 Countdown.